Welcome, everyone, to CSM Mastermind, our final CSM Mastermind of the year. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and our success coaching training program. We're back for our monthly live webcast today, talking about working effectively with product teams. This learning opportunity is brought to you by Success Coaching, the world leader in customer success professional development training. Closing in on 40,000 students from nearly 100 different countries, our skills development platform is making an impact across the globe. Whether you prefer self-paced learning, an instructor-led bootcamp, an interactive workshop, or a personalized weekly coaching program, our wide range of customer-focused programs and formats are tailored to meet the unique needs and learning preferences of everyone. If you're eager to level up your customer-facing skills, don't miss out on these amazing learning opportunities that can truly transform your professional journey. Ashley has dropped a link to our program page along with any coupon codes we're offering right now. She's also dropping a link for a survey for guests who are interested in joining us as panelists next year. So please, if you are interested in being on this side of the conversation and being part of it, beyond just asking questions, please let us know. We would love to have you. We are looking for people who have something to say and want to join us and want to share. You can find out more about all of our programs and workshops at successcoaching.co. Now, this CSM Mastermind series is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic relevant to customer success. Coming next year, we're going to actually start to incorporate topics around customer support and customer service. So if you have friends or colleagues in support or service, let them know. We've got a couple of topics that we're adding to the calendar next year. And we think it's important that everybody in customer-facing roles has a place to go and has something to say, because your customer is making a decision every single experience they have with you. So we think that customer success needs to be a company-wide initiative, but it's definitely everybody in a post-sales role. No matter where you work, no matter what your role is or who your customers are, we've got you covered. A few housekeeping items before we get going. This webinar is being recorded, and we will be posting a replay and transcript on our website early next week. So if you have to leave at the top of the hour, remember we go 15 minutes past the hour. If you have to leave at the top of the hour, you can jump onto the website early next week and watch the replay or read the transcript. Now, we do encourage active participation, so please feel free to ask your questions using the Q&A button located at the bottom of your Zoom interface. Questions with higher upvotes will receive priority during the Q&A session. For our LinkedIn Live audience, you can also post your questions directly and they will be relayed to us. Thank you. I think it's Santana. Yes, Ashley? I think it's Santana.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Santana, for doing that. To maintain a smooth discussion, please use the chat window exclusively for commentary while directing your questions to the Q&A window. Now, there's a bunch of thought leadership out there along with loads of theories on how to deliver customer success, but in this series, we're going to focus on practical real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those who are actually doing customer success day in and day out. And to make that happen, we've invited three amazing panelists to join me for a roundtable discussion. These are folks who are really darn good at what they do, and we're going to ask them to spill the beans on their experiences and perspectives. So without further ado, I want our panelists to introduce themselves to y'all and share a little bit about who they are and what they do. And let's get started as usual in alphabetical order with Ariel.
Thanks, Andrew. So I'm AB, so I always get to go first on these things, so that's always fun. So my name is Ariel. I've got about 25 years of experience leading all of the post-sale customer-facing teams at software companies. So going way back to the on-premise software days and now, of course, in SaaS. So I am Vice President of Customer Experience at a company called Pharos, and we're a private equity-owned company in the print ops space. So if you think about print, just to give you a little idea of what we do, you think about printing as an individual, it's very simple, right? But if you look at it in an enterprise organization, it's extremely complex. There's a lot of IT infrastructure around it. So we have a simple SaaS solution that eliminates all of that infrastructure. So I started my career in mostly leading professional services teams, but about 10 years ago, I got into customer success. I created the first customer success team corporate-wide at Experian. And you probably think of credit reporting when you think of Experian, but they do a lot of other things. I was in a B2B software division of Experian. So anyway, really looking forward to this discussion. I know the panelists here are extremely intelligent. And I would just say one other thing. I'm dealing with a concussion. So if I turn my camera off, it's just because I'm starting to feel sick and have to look away from the screen. I'm hoping that doesn't happen, but if I do, that's why. Thanks.
Thanks, Ariel, and I'm glad you're feeling good enough to join us for our talk today. So we appreciate that. Jasmine, you're up.
All right. Hi, everybody. I am Jasmine Reynolds. I am a senior enterprise customer success manager at Pluralsight Flow. I've been doing account management and customer success management for almost 2 decades. Time really flies when you're having fun. Pluralsight Flow, I work with developers every single day. Our platform focuses on product delivery and things like that. So I've gotten really passionate about product and, how customer success can really contribute to product feedback and like evolution of product. And my coworker in the background, her name is Wanda Scarlett, in case everyone's curious.
I was just about to ask you that. Wanda Scarlett, huh? What kind of coworker is Wanda Scarlett?
She's a slacker most of the time. Occasionally she'll get a little riled up, but she's usually sleeping in the background.
Yeah.
But she is a Stafford Terrier.
Okay.
Yeah.
I assumed a terrier. Saw those ears, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
she's a terrier.
Big ears. Yeah.
Yeah, my standard poodle Teddy, who's normally laying down next to me, is off at doggy daycare today. So he's off hanging out with his friends. Otherwise, he'd be sitting in the background as well. Awesome. Thanks, Jasmine. Thanks for joining us today. And last but certainly not least, Mike.
Hey everyone, my name is Mike Lee. I am coming to you from Durham, North Carolina, and my background is kind of varied. I started out of school as a Java developer, did some .NET stuff, some Rails, all those sorts of things, then moved into the business side of the business side of the world. So I ended up doing product management, program management, those sorts of things. And I believe that's what led me into customer success. I've been in customer success for, I guess, about 13 or so years. And I've been an individual contributor all the way up to a head of customer success. And right now I am at a place called Avalara. Now, you may not know this, but almost every single one listening has interacted with Avalara, and you may not have known it. If you shopped online and you had to put your address in and then your sales tax was calculated, that more than likely that was Avalara. If it comes up and says, would you use this address instead? That's Avalara, because we calculate sales tax based on your address, not your zip code, anything else. So what we do, we have thousands of customers worldwide, and I lead a team of customer success managers at Avalara, and my space is about 360 million as far as revenue, and I really enjoy it. I love customer success. I am a deep traditionalist and very passionate about customer success. However, I do have product background, and that's why this topic is extremely important to me, because if we can work on the connection between CS and product, if we could get that right for just one person listening here, we've made all product professionals very, very happy. So I'm really excited about jumping in here.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. Once again, we all appreciate your time today. So now let's get to the topic at hand. The traditional model of product development, where product teams set the roadmap and customer-facing teams simply relay feedback, needs to be fixed. This disconnect wastes countless hours of customer goodwill and squanders opportunities for market leadership. The companies that are winning today have completely reimagined how customer insights flow into product decisions. And that's what we're going to explore today. Before we dive into solutions, though, what is the most significant misalignment you've seen between product and customer-facing teams, and what was the root cause?
I'll jump in here, Andrew. So, as I mentioned, I did product management, and for a long time, I was at Credit Suisse. We were developing an investor portal for customers for our customers, a high value investors. And what we did, it was just like just like agile, if you will. You do a little bit and you continue to grow. You look for features, you continue to grow it, and so forth. And I think the problem we had here was those who were really customer facing, getting people to use this particular product. Um, they they took, since they were high value customers, high investment value customers, every little thing that they asked for, a button, an image, a piece of data here, there, they would come to us with high priority. Hey, you got to do this right now because so and so is gonna, if they don't have this here, they're not gonna use the portal. They're not gonna use this. They're not gonna use that. And it got to a point to where um, high level leaders were involved saying, oh, you got to do this for JP Morgan. They got to do this. You got to get this. You got to get this. And it took the power away from me as a product manager to prioritize what actually goes to the product teams, what's needed. Instead of collaborating and saying, okay, we have 10 customers that could bring this level of revenue in to if you add this particular feature, it was every single little thing that came in, every little piece here, and it was pressure. And it made me distrust the customer facing organizations. And it made me, not even want to hear from them. So a lot of times I wouldn't even respond. And that's things would escalate. So I think that tension between the two is they're setting expectations. Oh, we're going to do, it's easy. We'll do this, tomorrow, versus coming to us, letting us prioritize and get back to you for to set your expectations. That was a really, really rough time in my career, and maybe the reason I got out of product.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Everything's a priority, and there's no, like you said, that you lose that ability to prioritize on your own.
Mhm.
From a product perspective, it breaks that trust, and that you have with your customer facing team completely disintegrates.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Who else? Who else has what do you got, Ariel?
Yeah, so mine is not as interesting as Mike's, but I will tell you, when I was at Experian, we had a very dysfunctional, it's actually probably the most dysfunctional relationship between product and the success organization and support organization that I've ever seen. So we had a disconnected product organization that lived in the UK region, which was our largest region for this particular business unit of Experian. And then my business unit was based in the United States. So there was like this black hole that we were sending product feature requests to, bug fixes. It was going into our help desk system, into their Jira, never to be heard of again because there was no process around how we were supposed to interact with the product team. So, and I hear what Mike's saying from the product side. I mean, we were probably pretty annoying trying to push everything in initially as it was coming up, and with no system around prioritization. Solving that problem was extremely challenging. I think one of the things we did that really helped was we started prioritizing by revenue when we were sending in feature requests, for example, and also even bug fixes. So that's mine. There's a lot more to it. There was a lot of process fixing around it, but that's the one that I experienced.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Jasmine?
I'll just add that I think focusing on not only the customer feedback, but also your CSMs. Your CSMs are often using the product more than your customers. So understanding where they're leaving the platform to do other things. And that's exactly what we're doing at Pluralsight Flow. There was situations where I needed to paint the picture to our accounts, and our product team was like, okay, so what are you doing? And we need to understand where the gap is and why you're leaving the product. If we're trying to drive customers, our team to the product, what reasons are we leaving? And that ultimately turned into some new feature releases just recently. So it's not just tapping into, the customer, also looking at your team and how they're using the product as well. And that's a big gap.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I think that a lot of product teams definitely miss the boat, not taking into account the experience that the actual customer success managers bring to the table, not just with the customer, but actually using the product themselves. But when you have a situation like what Mike said, Mike talked about, there's a lack of trust. You create a lack of trust, you create a disconnect, right? And that's something that we need to remember. And just like we've talked about dozens of times, we need to be thinking about our internal customers just like we think about our external customers, employing empathy, understanding their perspective, understanding, hey, if I mean, how much better would that experience have been, Mike, if everybody that was submitting all those product requests actually took a step back and said, okay, what's it like to be Mike in this situation, right? They wouldn't be inundating you with everything as a freaking high priority. Right. Now, and once again, customer success out of anybody in the organization has no excuse because part of your training needs to be being empathetic, right? So you just need to apply the same empathy that you apply with your customers to your internal customers, to your cross-functional teams that you're collaborating with. Now, something you did touch on, Mike, in your story about translating that customer feedback. Customer-facing teams often need to translate customer feedback for product teams to understand. And what I'd like to next understand, or I'd like to next talk about, is what's your approach to not just communicating the technical requirements, but also conveying the broader business context and revenue implications of those requests, right? How do you quantify and present the potential impact of addressing or maybe not addressing specific customer needs?
Well, I think for me, and I think we'll see across the industry, a lot of people may do this. It is, getting together the requests that happen and understanding how many customers are impacted by this. Okay. And the level of impact there, right? What's the level of impact? Because we all know as customer success leaders is there are things that are just nuances. It's just, oh, that's just kind of annoying. And then there's some things that are like, if this doesn't change, I'm gonna go to I'm gonna go to a
You're going to go
competitor.
somewhere else, right? You're going to go
Right.
to right.
There's a array of that. But in my previous role, a place called Public Input, it was a survey type company. Um, One of these nuanced things became a larger issue. It was, and again, coming from a product background, sometimes we can be blinded by, well, of course it's easy to do this. You just click here and click here, and it makes sense. From a developer's mind, it looks that way, but from a user's mind, it's going to look a little different. And so, we kept hearing customers say, you know, this would be so much easier if we didn't have to go through three different pages or clicks to publish this. Why can't we just publish it straight out from where we're previewing it here instead of doing this and letting it load and do all, if it's a long survey and so forth? And so when you start to hear that, and we look at trends, this is what's really good about customer success managers. They're able to see these industry trends, these trends that these customers are having. If we can start to gather that information and understand how many customers are impacted, we can assign revenue numbers and say, we have customers who are, a total of $70 million in ACV or ARR that are asking for this change. This may be good to continue that renewal or retention and so forth. Let's start to look at it there. If we start to see this continuing on, and I think we'll probably talk about like upvoting feature requests and so forth a little bit later, but I think connecting that information, connecting the trends and together to present it to the product team as we have a number of customers that need this. I think that makes the decision and the prioritization on the product side so much easier. That's how I would communicate it.
So, Mike, do you quantify it by revenue? That's typically how I would do it. I mean, and like right now, I'm looking at an instance where I have a customer threatening to churn over a feature that we don't support or a particular type of hardware we don't support, but it's a $17,000 customer. I mean, I've got $2 million customers that have priorities that have to take precedence over that. So, how do you quantify it typically?
Well, I think an individual customer's revenue is probably the last deciding factor that I would have, right? I would say, how important is it? Is it a good change? Does it make sense? Do we think other customers would be impacted by this or make a big difference for them? Um, a $17,000 customer doesn't think they're a $17,000 customer. They think they're a customer. And so, um, using that to not to filter if you're going to contact put that towards the product team, I think maybe one of those things where okay, it's not going to impact anything. It's not going to it really doesn't make a difference to our enterprise customers and so forth. It's not really it's a smaller customer. Maybe we'll kind of put it on the roadmap. We'll set some expectations. Look, we'll put it up there and see if the product team will take it. But I don't necessarily I'm not sure that I would necessarily, and I could be convinced differently of this, but I'm not sure that I would necessarily say, "Oh, it's only a $17,000 customer." Yeah,
Well, I'm not
I'm
saying,
not
yeah,
gonna.
no, I agree with you. I'm not saying we're not going to do it, but we
Right,
did
right,
just what you just said, right? Which is it's on the roadmap, it's
right.
pushed way down because I mean, obviously, development resources are finite, right? So when I've got Amazon, for example, asking me for
Hmm.
6 things that are going to take priority over the $17,000 university customer, I mean,
Right,
it is what it is. But I think revenue is a good way to figure it out, not just the revenue of the customer, but as you just noted, revenue across the customer base, right? What other customers would use this feature? And I think you have to do it that way because you're competing with sales too. Sales is going to have requests for prospects that they're talking to. So I think, what is the customer revenue versus the sales revenue at stake if we don't do this particular feature? Or you get to bugs, that's another thing. How do you decide which bugs to fix first? I mean, there's criticality, right? But if it's only affecting the $17,000 customer, I mean, does it get prioritized over something else? I mean, there's a lot
right.
of variables here.
I mean, at the end of
That's
the day, you got to you got to treat every customer with the same level of respect. But I'm not going to treat a $17,000 customer the same way I'm going to treat a $17 million customer. That's
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
basic unit
Absolutely.
economics. But yeah, I think you can't look at it on an individual customer. You got to look at them in the aggregate. That $17,000 customer's request part of a cohort of 30% of our customers that are all basically asking for the same thing. Okay, well
Yeah, of course.
that has a lot more weight, and that's why I think attaching a revenue, some sort of number to each of
Mhm.
the requests
Right.
is important for a product to understand. Here's the potential upside or revenue at risk if we don't address this.
That's right. But keeping it on the docket is really important because that $17,000 customer's request may come up at a $17 million customer and say,
Yeah.
"Hey, look, we need this." Say, "Oh, you know what? We actually already had that on the product map. We can bump that up now."
Yeah.
Right? We could do that. Yeah.
Jasmine, you got anything to add?
I would just say not only just like thinking about the dollar amount, but the number of people impacted by that feature request, right? So if you have an enterprise account, obviously it's going to be usually more net, amount, but how many people does that impact? How many people on that account does it impact? So it could be a larger number than even just the net amount. So
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Okay, so and just a reminder, folks, please, you got any questions for us, use that Q&A functionality, Q&A button, ask those questions. We'll get to them here in about, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes. So next question I have for our guests, when you reflect on successful collaborations with product teams, what specific approaches or frameworks made those interactions more effective than others? And what I'm talking about is, taking an agile approach, using user stories, Scrum, that sort of thing. I mean, do you have specific approaches or frameworks that have made those interactions more effective than others?
Yeah, if you could give it to them in user stories, that would be great, right? But I don't know that most CSMs are equipped to do that, or even CS leaders are equipped to do that or trained to do that.
Or
I
do they
think,
even understand user stories?
well,
Does
I think
somebody
they can
want to
understand.
explain what a user story is?
What?
Does somebody want to explain what a user story is? Just to make sure we're all on the same page.
Well, I can explain that.
Yeah.
Jazz, if you want to do it.
You could go,
You want to
Mike.
do?
Go
Okay.
ahead.
All right. So for those who don't know, user stories are a way to communicate some sort of functionality. There's variations to what it is, but what I'm about to say is essentially what a user story is. Again, there's few variations, but they're pretty much the same. Now, a user story sounds like this. As a let's say as a shop owner, so I'm gonna do this for an Avalara kind of feature,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, yeah. That's great. Great.
As a shop owner, I want to be able to understand uh, within seconds if a customer visiting my online store is um, has an exemption certificate, tax exemption certificate, so that I won't charge tax to that customer. So, as a shop user, I want to do something so that something happens. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, what this is how development teams communicate in the agile world. That's how they determine how to create something. So the development team would look at this in their little planning sessions and so forth, and they'll say, okay, this user wants to look at exemption certificates so they don't charge tax for a customer. What do we need to do? And they create these different tasks in order to have a user check exemption certificates on a transaction. They take that and they take it and say, okay, we need to do these 13 things in order to do this. That's how they use user stories. How it benefits customer success is when you're listening to a customer, they may say, I want a button right here. Well, what do you need a button for? What are you trying to accomplish? Right? And why do you need it right here? Okay. Oh, you want it right here because you don't really want to scroll to the bottom of a screen if you have a long inventory list, so forth, all that kind of thing. Right. And so as a CSM, there's a lot of stuff out there on YouTube and all kinds of training just to learn about user stories so that when you hand this over to a product manager, they can put it in the queue and they don't really have to do much to it and say, here, this is what we can do and we can prioritize it because now you're speaking their language.
You're
It
speaking the
is
language of product development. Yeah,
essentially
yeah,
a
yeah,
different language on how
yeah.
to communicate product needs. So that's what a user story is. There's a couple variations, but that's essentially what you want, how you want to communicate to a product person.
That is exactly how we do it at Flow. We do it and then you fill in the persona. I
Mhm.
want blank so that I can blank. But I do want to just double click on what Mike is saying is that like it's understanding, it's getting to the root cause because 9 times out of 10, whatever they're asking for is actually not what they need.
Right.
So it's
Yes.
about having some really strong discovery questions to get to what they're trying to solve because you might say, oh, we really, really need to make this feature a priority. The team shuffles things around in their sprints, deliver it, and it still doesn't solve for the problem. So I think it's about not only speaking the language of the product team, right, by doing those user stories, but also like just making sure that you're actually delivering a full story, a full package so that you can solve the actual problem.
This is where uh, techniques like the five whys
Yeah.
become
Yes.
really, really
Yes.
beneficial. Real peel that
Absolutely.
back, understand,
Yep.
um,
And,
understand what that customer is looking for.
and you solve a lot of that with the five whys or even user stories, talking to your customer. You say, oh no, you could do that here.
Yeah,
some of the stuff that they're asking for is already there. They just don't know it, right? So
100%.
that just opens up a conversation of explaining why they want something, and that could help the CSM understand the customer's needs as well.
So that's something that I used to coach my teams on all the time. Like if a customer's asking for something, I want you need to employ five whys. That your first step is to peel that
Yes,
and understand because
that's right.
we need to determine. I was going to take that down to the next question. It's a great segue about determining, how do you determine which customer feedback deserves immediate escalation to the product team versus what can be aggregated over time. And as kind of a sidebar to that is, when do we determine what the customer's asking for really isn't an ask? It's, hey, I'd like to see it done this way. Okay, well,
Mhm.
we're in the SaaS world. We can't do everything the exact way that everybody wants it. That's kind of the give and take of having a single code line, right? You need to, and this is also part of the customer success role and part of the change management effort is sometimes you need to teach them how to do things differently, right? We're going to help you get to where you want to go. We're going to help you achieve what you're trying to achieve, but it's going to take a different path than what you expected.
Yeah, that's really hard for CSMs a lot of the time, but what I always train my CSMs to do is feel comfortable telling customers what they need to hear rather than what they want to hear,
Yeah.
right? I think that's extremely important, especially when you're talking about product features.
Yeah. 100%.
I
So
mean,
how do you determine, so we talked about your situation, Mike, at the beginning about the everything was a priority. How do you determine which customer feedback deserves that immediate escalation versus things that should be aggregated over time? Does anybody have a prioritization process that they go through or that they suggest that customer success should follow?
So I can jump in here
Yeah.
and add that the way my team currently does it is it depends on what the team is currently focused on. So for the CSM, it's understanding what are the key features of the roadmap for that year or for that quarter. What does that look like? And does my feature request actually build on or add to what they're currently working on, right? Because that's kind of an easy, or can be, I'm not going to say easy, it can be a little bit easier to add it to a sprint if it's already something that they're currently working on and it makes sense to maybe add this little small fix or whatever, right? But then also in terms of priority, I think it's also figuring out again, how much does it impact accounts that it could impact, any accounts or a dollar amount or a size of an account. Or you can also prioritize simply by how long it takes. Because I know for my team, there's like some things that's like, I'm throwing out a random number, 500,000 lines of code. And it's like, yep, it's not coming anytime soon. Or if it is a simple fix, that could be an addition to what they're currently working on.
I think it's really important to remember that there's multiple groups that are stakeholders in this, right? It's not just customer success. So you've got sales as a stakeholder, customer support is often a stakeholder, and then what the product team thinks it wants to build, they're a stakeholder too. So you need to take into account all of these competing groups, and ideally they should all be working together to create the priority list. It shouldn't just be CS in a vacuum doing this. That's a huge mistake.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, on that kind of similar theme, right? I think a big part of that prioritization and just interacting with product is creating and maintaining a strong relationship with the product team. So how do you maintain that? How do you maintain that strong relationship with product teams when you need to be persistently advocating for customer needs that might conflict with their current roadmap?
CS should have a regular meeting with product. If you
oh,
don't, if your CS leader hasn't set that up, take initiative and do it yourself.
I was going to say the exact same thing. A regular meeting with product will help both ways. It helped the relationship both ways. It helps helps the CS understand the roadmap, how it all works, even talk about user stories or whatever you want. But it also helps the product understand the pressures that CSMs are under when they're on the phone with the customer who is saying, "Look, you all need to do this. You need to understand that." And I think you build from there, and you both get a little empathy from both sides, and I think that goes a long way.
I will say that it is just in the same way that you try to figure out your account's love language. It's also figuring out what your internal account's love languages are, right? So it's speaking, like Mike said earlier, it's speaking the language of your product team and delivering information that they can trust and that they can immediately action, and that there's not 50 million conversations post, that recommendation. Additionally, if you do have the opportunity to even bring in someone from your product team to talk to your accounts, I realize that not everybody's able to do this, but we are, and it's very impactful because they almost hear it from, again, the horse's mouth, right? And exactly what they're looking for. Maybe even show them, the product team can show them, like, here's what we're thinking about doing. Does this actually align with what you're looking for? And getting that feedback. So I'm going to go back to learning the language. It's also learning how your product team just operates in general. Are they working in sprints? How long are their sprints? What are their focuses? Because you're asking for them to prioritize everything. And let's say that they do take it on, right? In the middle of a sprint, that's scope creep. That is like not good. And these are things that the team, your product team, are held accountable for. You have to understand what their product team's pain points are, and what they're held accountable for is really important for your CSM to know.
Now, I've had plenty of product teams, worked with plenty of our customer success teams that are trying to, pull their product team members into those conversations with customers, and have gotten a lot of pushback. And so one of the things that I used to do, and I used to coach my team on, was, if we're going to ask product to come in, we need to reassure product that this isn't going to be some session where everything the customer asks for, they're going to get, right? So you need to, as a customer success manager, you need to kind of act as that shield, and not only allay the concerns of your product managers that are getting involved, that you're going to ensure that this isn't a, ask me, well, whatever you ask me, you're going to get type of session. You got to make sure to set that expectation with the customer, right? And you need to be that person in that conversation, whether it's in person, it's on a phone, to ensure that you don't go down these rabbit holes of the customer expecting everything that they're asking for. Okay, super important. One other thing to add about the maintaining relationships that I found very helpful. And it was a lot easier when I was working in an office, but even when I was working remotely and I was coming into the office on occasion, when I'd come into the office, of course, I'd meet with my sales counterparts. I would meet with marketing. I would meet with some of the other folks in ops and things like that. But I always make it my business to have some sort of face-to-face, take them out to lunch, go grab a drink with somebody in product. I always tried to buddy up to somebody on the product team. They may own just a piece of the product, but having that person that I had built a relationship with in product, and even in the virtual world, setting up just a coffee. Hey, let's do a virtual coffee talk. And it's not necessarily about asking for a bunch of product stuff. It's just about making a connection with someone. Can be incredibly powerful, can be incredibly helpful when you are in a situation where you've got to get product to look at something that's important to one of your important customers. I'm not suggesting that you're manipulating them in any way, but I think it's good to have those connections.
So kind of expanding on that a little bit, Andrew, and this is a question for anybody, but what do you do as an individual contributor CSM when the leader doesn't have that kind of relationship? Because I've seen that before on success teams that I've inherited where the prior leader didn't have the relationship and everything was chaos. But what can an individual contributor CSM do in that circumstance?
I think it goes back to the adage that you don't have to have a title to be a leader.
Yes.
and reaching out directly to the product team, product owner, product manager, whoever, whatever the structure is, goes a long way. I know when I was a product manager and people would just reach out to understand our process, understand, that sort of thing. Hey, what's on the roadmap? Can you talk to me about the roadmap? Um, that went a really long way. And it didn't have to be somebody's manager. You can start to facilitate that, which may help your leader jump on that and continue to facilitate that relationship. But you don't have to have a title to reach out to someone and understand and learn. It goes a really long way just doing that. Just a simple question, simple coffee or whatever it may be, you know, that could really work for you.
Help me understand how we can work better together. Help
Yeah.
me understand how I can help me understand what your desired outcomes are. Help me understand how you're measured, right? These are all these things that we're doing once again as customer success managers with our customers, with our external customers. We should be doing the same thing with our internal customers.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
all right, let's take a look at some of the questions from the audience. And let's see our first and feel free to add more questions, folks. If you see a question on that list that you want to upvote, we'll move it up the priority list. So first question comes from anonymous attendee. Thanks for joining us again, anonymous attendee. What are your best recommendations to quickly capture product feedback directly from customers? Looks like Mike, you wanted to jump in on this one first. What have you got for anonymous attendee?
Yeah, so obviously there's always products for everything, right? And I've used a product called AHA for a long time. We don't use it here, but I've used it previously. And just like you're upvoting in this Q&A, what happens is customers there's a facility for in AHA for customers to send in, product enhancements and other customers can look at it. You can link it to your website or so forth or the support portal, and people can upvote the different features themselves. That automatically gives priority. But in the absence of a product like that, what we can do, what you can do, and what we did in Conga is it was kind of brute force, and really wasn't all that pretty. But you could, have a Google Doc, you can have some sort of short shared resource that works the same way. You can have customers input information, you can have upvotes or people, commenting on it or so forth. And what we did in Conga, well, it was Aptus before Conga, but we would take that list regularly to the product team and say, hey, look, this is what our customers are saying. This is what they're interested in. This one had 25 votes. The product team loved it because it directly gave them input in what customers or a variety of customers were thinking. And hey, maybe they can think a little bit differently about the different features. So something like that, AHA is really the biggest one that I know of. That is AHA with apostrophe, if anyone's wondering about AHA.
There's AHA, there's user voice,
Yeah.
there's ideas functionality in Salesforce. We got something similar
Product
in
board.
HubSpot. I
Yeah.
actually used the ideas functionality right after they released it many, many, many years ago, back in 2008 when I was launching one of the first customer success teams.
Mhm.
Ideas was awesome. It was real simple. Just post them up there. People could comment. They could
Yep.
upvote ideas. And what we would do as a customer facing team as well as a product team is on a regular basis, we'd rationalize that list and say, hey, look, this one's bubbling up to the top,
Mhm.
and everybody who's attached to it ends up getting. This just happened with HubSpot. There was a featured request that I put into HubSpot, got a bunch of upvotes, and they actually ended up just officially releasing it to GA last week. And then everybody who upvoted it and commented on it got a notification, hey, we've got this feature now.
Right. The Gong has a way you can pull out feature requests out of calls as well, just in case anyone's wondering as well.
I have to second both AHA and Ideas. Ideas is particularly good if you're in that Salesforce ecosystem, like you're using Service Cloud and your help desk is in Salesforce and you have it tied into Jira. That can be a really powerful solution as well. But AHA is great. I've used that as well. have to second that.
And I forget what it's called in HubSpot, but it's the same feature type of thing. So I think most mature CRM systems out there at a minimum have something like that. It's not as, I don't know if it's, I don't think it's going to be as feature rich as a dedicated suite, like, or a dedicated product like Aha or User Voice or some of those other ones out there. But does Jira support that sort of thing, or is Jira really more of a tool for the developers to manage those requests once they've moved past the, okay, we're going to do it?
Yeah, it's a tool for the product and engineering teams, but if you have that integration, it can be really helpful to get things moved in there quickly.
Yeah.
I'll add in here really quickly, in addition to everything that everyone's already said, getting clips from your actual conversation. Just, you don't need to send the full hour conversation. Your product team doesn't care about all the fluff. But if you can get clips of the discussion about the feature requests that they were talking about and send those like minute, 2 minute, whatever clips, that goes a long way too, because they're able to make that connection and hear it from them as well.
I love that, because you're also, especially if it's a frustrating situation, the voice, right? You can hear it in their voice, right? It's even better than just typing, quoting them in like a Slack message or an email. If you can just grab that little, do a little Loom video or something, and send it to them. Incredibly powerful when you can send that to the customer in their voice with their, to the product team in their voice with their emotion. It makes it a lot more powerful for sure. 100% agree with you, Jasmine. Awesome. Thank you, anonymous attendee. Hey, Mike, if you could hit the done button on that one, we'll move on to the next question. Wait. Let's see here. What
I think I hit done on the wrong one.
You hit done on the wrong one. Do me a favor and go back and hit done on that first one at the top. We'll go back and we'll make sure to answer that next question that you hit done on next.
Okay.
So the next question comes from I can't Ndungutse. How can one prioritize when it's a not-for-profit organization and revenue is not really a factor?
Okay. Well, I think I selected this one to answer live as well.
Okay.
And what I would say here is when we talk about revenue, we're talking about value. That's essentially what revenue is, value to the company. So if you're a nonprofit, what is it that is the value, right? Is it the outcomes of the customer? Is it the outcomes from the customer to the nonprofit? Whatever that may be, that makes it a valuable entry, a valuable piece of information. That's how you rank it. If it is the number of, the output is the number of homeless people that you serve, or whatever it may be, and food plates that you serve, whatever that nonprofit value is, if a customer of the nonprofit is of value to you, what is that value? And that's how you rank it. So just look at revenue as another way to rank value, and nonprofits would find the value, whatever the value is of that product, to the nonprofit itself. That's kind of how I would answer that.
Okay. Jasmine, Ariel, anything to add?
I second that. That's exactly how I would put it.
Are there any other metrics or data points that you found effective in building compelling cases for product changes that we haven't talked about?
As I mentioned earlier, I think it's the number of customers who are interested in a particular change or feature. And as customer-facing individuals, I think that's a number for me. Obviously, revenue is one, but also speed to, I guess if we can measure some way of how fast something can be completed if we were to eliminate 2 steps, right? If we can do some sort of, if we can look at a particular request, like I mentioned about public input, and say, well, we could publish these surveys a lot faster if we didn't have to go through these two intermediary steps. We can kind of measure that. Does it make sense? Is it a common sense kind of thing? I know that's not really a hard metric, but time to value on that particular feature maybe one to measure.
Well, I mean, time to value. I mean, I think it can be framed as a hard metric when you think about it from as an efficiency play.
Right.
Hey,
That's right.
I'm going to make my customers more efficient in this process, in this
Hmm.
workflow. I'm going to reduce, you know, it takes you, 5 minutes to do this transaction. I'm going to reduce that to 4 minutes. That means you can do that many more transactions in a day, right?
Hmm.
So it's an efficiency play.
I think another thing you can look at, I totally agree with that, by the way, but another thing you can look at is total number of users impacted. So if you know like how big your customer is in the nonprofit environment, like how many users do they have, how many people are getting affected by this particular feature across your customer base.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. Awesome. All right. Next question comes from another anonymous attendee, or maybe the same anonymous attendee. What is the best and most helpful way to compile customer feedback for the product team? Tools, processes, et cetera. Is there anything that CSM should prioritize when passing along requests or feedback? And I know we've touched on a few things already, but Ariel, you wanted to jump in on this one?
Yeah, I think, well, we talked about tools already, and I think everybody's kind of talked about this question already. I would just say, and I keep harping on it, but it has to be a joint process through sales, support, and success. Success can't be doing these things in a vacuum. It has to be done jointly. And I will say, I haven't set this up at Pharos yet, but it's something on my agenda for next year. But there should be a meeting where you're pulling in the salespeople. You've got the CSMs, you have at least one representative from support, and then you're making a quantified list of, here's the feature request, right? Here's the dollars that are tied up into that. I think it's extremely important to do that, because if CS is doing it in a vacuum, it's never going to work correctly.
I think
So that
what's
would be
also
my,
important is how you frame those asks as well, right? What story,
yeah.
what narrative are you wrapping around it? I mean, we've talked about, we've talked about the revenue, we've talked about the impact and things like that, but I think it's really important that you are creating a narrative that helps the product team as much as possible understand the perspective of the customer, which the customer success team is uniquely positioned to be able to provide that. You can't just show up and say they want X,
Hmm.
right? You want to be able to tell a story. And that's why I
Right.
loved your suggestion, Jasmine, of grabbing a clip from an actual call, right, or conversation and handing that over to them.
There's no harm in inviting product team members to a customer call too. I highly recommend that people do that. Not every time, but in certain situations, it's very strategic. You can do that.
Right. And I want to add, um, I really love what you said, Ariel. I really appreciate that. And I would offer the more you can about a particular feature request or so forth, the more you can add in there that reduces the amount of time that a product manager has to research anything, the better it is, right? The sweeter the cake, the easier it is for them to
Yeah,
accept
totally
it.
agree.
Yeah.
So you have the thing Jasmine said about the video clip. You have the revenue projections. You have the number of customers. You have the impact. You have all of these kind of as much as you can when you're sending that information over there. The product manager will say, "Oh, okay, I get it. I don't have to do all of this research and data grabbing and so forth as much anyway." So I think that's a really good idea. Putting it all
Reduce the friction, right? Reduce the
right.
friction.
Absolutely.
And we're always trying to reduce the friction. We're trying to reduce the friction with our customers, which we should be reducing the friction with the asks that we're making of those cross-functional teams that we work with, for sure. Um, awesome. Thank you for that question. Our next question, once again, comes from another anonymous attendee, or the same one. Currently in the early stages of implementing a revenue-based feedback system, but buy-in has been more of an uphill battle than I expected. How do you overcome the pushback of product or executives resistant to the idea of giving up control of their roadmaps? Ariel, you wanted to jump in on this. I think one of the things what concerns me about the way that was worded was their roadmaps,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, everybody
Who are
owns the
you here to serve?
roadmap.
Are you here to serve you, or are you here to serve your customer base?
Yeah, totally agree. So I'm assuming that when executive is mentioned there, you're talking about the product executive. I certainly hope that's the only one that's pushing back on a revenue-based feedback system, because if you think about CEOs and sales CROs and folks like that, CMOs, they're going to be very revenue focused. So I would think this thing kind of appeals to them. But this kind of goes back to what I was saying about collaborating with the sales team in order to come up with that list of enhancements for the software. If you do that, you've got an ally now and a sales leader, right? So the sales leader, yourself as a CS leader or a CSM running this process, can go to a CEO and say, hey, look, we've got $14 million or whatever it is of revenue tied up in this potential feature request. We're having some trouble getting this feature put in. What should we do? I mean, there's some power to that when you've got two executives going to a CEO against hesitant product leader. So, but ultimately, product does own what's going to go on the roadmap. I think we have to be cognizant of that as well. So, I mean, there are things that are strategically on that roadmap that may not be customer requests that are longer term, and we have to understand that and at the end of the day, let product make those decisions and live with it. But certainly, we should be informing them.
I would say point towards making data-driven decisions, and understand what's their product roadmap, and maybe compare it to some of the feedback that you've already heard and compiled, and just really make that comparison to say okay, this is what you want to work on, but this is what we're hearing. How far off base are we? How much have we heard this feedback, and how long have we been hearing this feedback? And really make that cross comparison and lean into the data, rather just saying I have these gut feelings. No, show me the numbers.
Yeah, gut feelings don't pay the bills. I love the data-driven decision-making angle for sure. The other thing I want we all need to remember though is it also depends. This is one of those questions where it depends, right? It really depends on what, or part of this depends on what stage of the company you're at. In the early stages of a company, and I've worked for various stages, companies of various stages. In the early stages of the company, I give my product team a lot more leeway, a lot less pushback, because we're essentially creating, we're in the process of creating a product or creating a space. But it's there comes a point where you've got to say, okay, I now have enough of a customer base where I got to start listening to my customer more in order to grow this business. Awesome. Thank you for that answer. Let's see. Another question came in from an anonymous attendee. Can you share a template or review verbally how to send or discuss product feedback in a meeting with leadership teams to suggest important product change requests to improve satisfaction for customers due to churn increasing? I think Jasmine, you kind of addressed this actually in your last answer about data-driven decisions. It's really difficult to argue with the facts. Right? It's easy to argue with the gut feel. It's harder to argue with the facts. And I think that's definitely part of it. I think part of it is like you also suggested, Jasmine, grabbing those sound bites from your customers, so they're hearing it from the customer's mouth. Any other thoughts, ideas on this?
Go ahead, Mike. I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, I would say it's really difficult to have a template for how to discuss things because every single product is different. I would say what you want to gather is as much as you can about the customer and their temperature, like how important to a particular customer is, a particular product change or enhancement, but then also how important is that customer to you, to the customer, to the company. We kind of touched on this a little bit previously with Ariel's answer on a previous point, but companies value customers at different levels for different reasons. A lot of times it's revenue. What is the value of the customer to the company? If you have a customer whose annual revenue is $20 million, $20 is is relative. That could be high for some people and that could be low for some people. But what does that mean to your company?
Mm.
Is fixing this or adding this particular feature or fixing this particular feature important enough to say we need to prioritize this because we need this customer to stay, right? We really need this $20 million to stay. Some companies, that's not a big deal. It's, oh, 20 million, that's pocket change, But anyway, so I would say, what you want to do is take a moment to think about what are the important factors for that customer, what are to the company, and then what level of crisis is that customer in when they come to you about this product enhancement or feature include to include this feature. And you have to take that information. I don't know that there's a template we can say, okay, if you write these 8 things down and send them to a product team, they're gonna they're going to do it because every product team is different because every product is different. Every prioritization scheme is different. But I would say what's important to your company, what's important to leadership, what is important to your bottom line. And then when you start to meet with your product team, what's important to them? What do they listen for? How do they prioritize the request? And you can kind of put that together in a package to have a conversation.
So one thing I don't think we've talked about enough, to add to Mike's point there, is that understanding if there is an opportunity to create an iteration of, if it's a completely new feature, right? Having a conversation with the customer to say like, okay, if we were to deliver a V1 of this, what could that look like? And then what would a V2 look like? And what would a V3 look like, et cetera? Because there might be something simplistic that we can release or put on the roadmap, and then we continue to build off of that. That's what being agile and Scrum methodology is all about, is iterations and getting things out very quickly. And I think it's about having the conversation also with the customer to understand like, okay, can we take smaller bites of this? And if you could take a smaller bite, what could that look like? And because putting those smaller bites in front of your product team, you're going to get more engagement. You're going to get more buy-in.
What we used to do is we added, as I was in the CRM space for many years, we would implement the concept of severity and priority as both those, right? So severity was, right, how serious is this defect? And priority was really more about, okay, how soon should this be fixed or can it be fixed? And we would have the severity, in many cases, we'd have the severity from the customer's perspective, and the priority was something from development or engineering's perspective, product development's perspective of where they could put it in. And that just gave us different views of these requests, these bugs, these feature enhancements, things like that. Let's see. Thank you for that question. Anything else to add on that one, anybody? All right. So when back to some of the questions we had on the list, when when you have situations where product teams can't address certain customer needs immediately, how do you maintain that customer trust while managing expectations about future improvements? I mean, that's something, once again, I think, Ariel, you mentioned, don't tell the customer what you think they want to hear, tell them what they need to hear, right? How do we maintain that balance without kind of, giving in and causing a problem with our product team, making commitments that we can't follow through with, but also not be concerned about disrupting our relationship with our customer.
So you've got to be honest with customers, even when the news is not what they want to hear, like I was saying before. I mean, they're going to trust you a lot more. They're dealing with other vendors too. Remember that. So, they're not expecting everyone to give them everything they want all the time, but they do need to hear progress, status updates. And if the answer is we're not going to do it, or it's on the roadmap, but we don't know when it's going to be done, it's way down the line, tell them that. They'll understand. Much better to tell them that than string them along.
100%.
That's exactly what I was saying. We have control of the expectations we set.
Yeah.
And so if in the absence of us setting expectations for a particular feature request, the customer is going to create their own narrative, their own expectations, and we can never meet those expectations. So they're going to get more and more frustrated because in their head they've created, oh, it's going to be done in it's not much, it's going to be done in 3 months. When we say, okay, when we know it's going to be about 9 months, put it out there, let them process it, let them understand it, and at least they know, at the very least they know, okay, they've told me Mike's told me when it's going to happen, about when it's going to be taken up, then I know that's when it's going to be, So absolutely be honest, no matter how ugly or bad the information is. That's the only way to continue that trust.
I love what you said there, Mike. Don't give them the opportunity to create their own expectation.
That's right.
All right. Expectation management it's as much about, the expectations that you set as it is about the expectations that they're setting in their own mind. And if you're not clear, if you're not straightforward, if you're not transparent, they're going to create their own set of expectations. Right. And whether it's right or wrong, they've created those expectations that you or sales or marketing may have had nothing to do with, but they've created that in their mind. And the only way that you mitigate the risk of that happening is by being transparent and documenting that stuff.
Yeah. I will add that in addition to just being very transparent and honest, also making sure you're creating value as much as you can in every other area, right? Not to necessarily distract them from the thing, because you want to make sure you're communicating the status of that and those expectations, but also making them understand, like, we aren't wrapped around this one piece here. There's so much more we can deliver that we will, and we are. So highlighting other things around, maybe that one handicap or that one roadblock.
Yeah, delivering on those promises, managing to those expectations, exceeding expectations whenever possible. Those create credits, right? So when something comes along and it's not working the way I expected, when you have to have that conversation, say it's not going to, or we're not going to get to that for a while, it's gonna make that conversation a lot easier. Okay, well, I get it. I'm one of many customers, and you've done all this other great stuff for us, right? Fast time to value, and we're hitting our other desired outcomes. And this is why, to your point, Jasmine, it's really important that we continue marching along, helping them achieve what they're trying to achieve, making sure that they understand the value that's being achieved, and their key stakeholders understand that stuff, because that pays off across the board, especially when it comes to these types of asks. Awesome. So we do have one last question. It's off topic because we have a couple of minutes here. I don't have a problem getting into this and seeing what y'all might have for this individual. Niusha asks, I have a question that is unrelated to today's topic, but I would appreciate your help if you have any suggestion for me. As I am new to my CSM role, I'm having difficulty keeping track of my customer, constantly follow up with them. Any suggestions, recommendations for tools or methods? I mean, right out of the gate, it's CRM, CSA tool, even just a Even just a Google sheet, where you're tracking this stuff, but deliberately setting reminders, ticklers in your calendar to reach back out to customer for doing different things. Always a good thing. Ariel, what have you got to?
Yeah, I have some questions about the question. It's too bad we can't bring her on to ask more, but obviously a CSP is one solution to that, but I wonder if the problem is it's kind of being hinted at, maybe the customers are going dark or something like that. I would just add that, constantly following up with customers is not necessarily a good thing. You shouldn't be having meetings for the sake of having meetings. Anytime you have a meeting with a customer, there should be an agenda and some value should be delivered there. The check-in meeting is not a good thing. We shouldn't be doing check-ins. I always eliminate that from my team's vocabulary. So I would just keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, we call them check-ins, if check-in meetings behind the scenes, but when I get an email from somebody just checking in, it immediately goes to the trash.
Yep.
Right. Sorry, that's not value for me. All you're doing is you're checking off a box for yourself or for your management. Where'd you learn that, Ariel? Where'd you learn something like that? Every meeting with a customer needs to provide them with value.
I might have learned that from Success Hacker. I don't know.
All right, so we've come to the end of our time together today. I want to say how awesome our conversation has been, but hey, it's what matters most is what all of you think. So I kindly ask you to share your valuable feedback on LinkedIn, tagging me, our guests, Success Coaching, Success Hacker. Big thank you to our amazing panelists for generously sharing their ideas, thoughts, insights, and best practices. Let me leave you with this thought. Exceptional customer success managers understand they don't have all the answers, but they sure know where to find them. That's why we created the CSM Mastermind, to tap into the collective knowledge and experience of our community to support everyone's growth. Remember to sign up and mark your calendars for our first event of 2025 on January 15th, when we'll talk about leveraging data to drive customer retention and predict churn. Until then, make sure to make space for yourself and your mindset every single day. Have a great rest of your week and month. Happy holidays to everybody, and we'll see you next year.